fun watching the World Cup? I know I have. You know, soccer was actually my sport growing up in California. It's one of the areas in the US where soccer really started going on the West Coast back in the 1970s with AYSO and then later into club teams and developed into all kinds of things. And so I love watching the World Cup and these countries competing. And watching these countries, it really got me thinking, well, maybe we could do our own match here. We could do something different, like kind of like a World Cup, but a separate match, and that would be between the US, which is, I'm wearing my jersey. I just came back from the USA. I was actually in the LA area the last month. That's why you haven't seen too many videos, been traveling. Wanted to go to one of the World Cup games in the new SoFi Stadium where the LA Rams play, but the minimum ticket price for a nosebleed seat was $2,000 for the game I wanted to go to, and I just didn't want to spend the money. So I watched it all on TV, and it was great because it was in that time zone, whereas here in the Philippines, you got to get up, like 3 o'clock in the morning with watching the semifinals here when I came back. Pretty crazy. Anyway, we're going to do a match today, kind of like the World Cup, but between two teams. It's going to be the USA versus the Philippines. So we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to keep score, and we're going to compare the two countries. Obviously, the Philippines isn't a soccer-based country. It's more about basketball. Here is very popular. They have the Philippine National Basketball League, right? I think it's called the PBA. Volleyball is another one that's pretty popular. And so this match is going to be not about sports particularly. It's going to be about which country wins for the type of lifestyle you can have and afford, and if you're considering retirement, which country is best for that. So that's our match today. And after living here in the Philippines for a full year now and traveling here for 10 years and spending the last month, basically back in the States, I've noticed some kind of key differences between the two countries. And there are certain things I appreciate about both. The US has its strengths and the Philippines have its strengths. So today what we're going to do is we're going to put the two countries head to head. We're going to use 16 categories, just like in the World Cup in the round of 16. And so we'll compare each of these categories and we're going to score it. So every round has a winner. One of the two teams will get a point, right? And then we're going to keep score as we go. And then at the end, we'll see which country wins for both the lifestyle you'd like to have and for those that are considering possibly retiring in the Philippines versus the US. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to make it like a match type thing today. So let's get started with the different 16 categories and the round of 16. So here's round one, and here we go. Those announcers always crack me up. At halftime, they're like, 45 minutes down, 45 minutes to go. All right, our first category. Well, it's basically going to be eating, right? Food, groceries, and restaurants. We're going to compare these two categories. And a lot of this is going to be based upon your own personal preference, but I'm just going to kind of keep it general. First of all, the grocery selection is just far better in the US. There's so many more item choices. And there's competing brands within item choices. Where the Philippines is, if they have the item, it's usually just one brand. If you're really fortunate, maybe two. So the Philippines has a really limited selection. And there are some hard to find Western items that are really difficult to find in the Philippines. Here's a list of just a few of them, for an example. Sour cream, right? Hard to find here. And if you do, it's in a liquid form, which is just really weird. Because, we use sour cream with Mexican food, we use it with dips and all that, but it's kind of, a more consistent, harder type of a product. Not here. If you can find it, it's liquid. They don't have refried beans in the Philippines. They have ice cream, but the ice cream, well, it just tastes different. It's got a weird, different taste. I shouldn't say weird, a different taste. And then cookies are completely different here across the board. You are not going to find the US brands that you're used to, right? They're going to be different, taste different, and so that's just something else that goes on here. And then cheese options are limited depending what you're looking at. You can find cheddar, you can find jack cheese, you can find mozzarella and Colby. But other than that, it's pretty limited. And then seasonings are different here. They do have seasonings, and they do have some of those McCormick packs, but they tend to be more for like pan-sit and different Filipino dishes. They don't sell Lawry seasoning salt, which in the US we use on steak and hamburgers and chicken, or they don't sell the Montreal steak seasoning that I like so much that you can get at Costco or any major grocery store. I think one of the things that is really varies in the Philippines that's very consistent in the US is the quality of beef. And in the Philippines, it's just really hard to find consistency. For me, the hamburger here often tastes kind of different with a aftertaste I don't particularly care for. Where in the US, hamburger is very, very consistent. And steaks are very consistent in the US. Here, it's hit or miss. Now, as far as restaurants go, the food quality varies quite a bit depending where you are and location in the Philippines and even within a particular city. Whereas it's a little bit more consistent in the US, especially in the chains. For example, I really like lasagna. And it's really hard to find here, at least the way that I'm used to it, how we make it in the West, where we use like tomato sauce and ground beef and then layers of noodles and ricotta and all that. It just tastes different over here. So you can find it, but I'm usually kind of disappointed. Pizza, though, in the Philippines is generally quite good. Lots of Italian pizza places. That's very common, especially here in the Alana area of Bohol. Lots of pizza, no problem. And then some of the things that are good in the Philippines that are easy to find, good quality, would be eggs. There's lots of eggs. Chicken, pork, and fish. Those are all really good choices here. I had a fresh cut set of pork ribs that came from a local butcher shop here. And the guy told me, hey, we killed the pig this morning and I have the ribs. So we took the ribs. They were the best ribs I've ever had in my life. It was like a steak. So a lot of it has to do with how fresh the meat is and where it's coming from. But as far as the Philippines, it's mostly pork, fish, and chicken as far as proteins go, along with the eggs. And then in the grocery stores, they're very consistent as far as your quality and availability of product in the US, where in the Philippines, they either have it in stock or it's out of stock. And out of stock is kind of a common term to mean a lot of different things there, just that it's not available. But if you're in Metro Manila, Cebu City, and probably Davao, you're going to have some of the club stores, which is kind of like a Costco or a Sam's Club, a little bit more limited product range. Focus half the store on food only and the other half on kind of soft goods, not really electronics like we do in the States. But the two stores that are club stores in the Philippines are S&R, and we hit the one in, I guess it's Mandawi, which is right next to Cebu City all the time. The other one is called Langers. So again, depends upon your location with the Philippines if you have access to that. In Bohol, we don't have any club stores. And in Cebu and Manila, they have Chili's, they have TGIF, and then Texas Roadhouse. So 3 very American type restaurants that, again, if you're in the metro areas, you can hit all the time. You get further out like us in Bohol, we still have 1.2 million people on this island, and yet we don't have those options. So I'm going to say, as far as food offering, quality, consistency, and restaurant opportunity, I think USA is a clear winner. So we're going to put 1 point in the USA team, and Philippines starting off here with a 0. So we got 1-0. Again, you make adjustments, you make it work. But as far as availability and consistency, I think it goes to the US on that one. All right, with the score 1-0, let's move on to round 2. The category for round 2 is going to be the friendliness of the people, especially when welcoming foreigners to their country. So that's the category, friendliness and welcoming foreigners. I feel like in the US it depends on the region, right? Your location makes a big difference. In general, in the US, we would say people in the Midwest in particular, and then maybe in the South, Southeast are quite friendly. some of the other areas in the U.S. where there's a lot of density of population, maybe they're not quite as welcoming to other people groups automatically, just not naturally as friendly. Compared to the Philippines, I'm compared to the Philippines, which I consider to be the friendliest people on the planet, right? In the Philippines, they're generally accepting of other people no matter where you're from. They're very much not judgmental no matter what people group that you come from. So it's interesting here. They're very accepting, they're warm and welcoming, they'll give you directions and insight and answer your questions, and very helpful. And I find conversations very easy here in the Philippines, right? Now, they say that Manila is a little bit like New York City. They have, about 20 million people, or a fifth of the population is in Metro Manila, which is just huge. So they're a little bit more friendly maybe outside of Metro Manila, but again, even there, I think people are generally friendly. And I think when expats first show up here, whether it's Dumaguete, where a lot of the Americans go, or it's Cebu City, which is a good launching place for, new expats trying to get their feet landed and then easy access to things to make the transition a little smoother, or places like BGC and Makati over in the Luzon area up in Metro Manila, I feel like expats are generally welcomed, and they're not really frowned upon. So I feel like overall, kind of given all of these things, the Philippines clearly is the leader as far as welcoming foreigners, making them feel accepted and part of the society. So we're going to put the Philippines up on the board. That's going to tie our score to 1-1. USA 1, Philippines 1. All right, let's move on to the next round. For round 3, the category is going to be cost of living. So let's just talk about that. I mean, it's going to be a pretty easy winner on this one because housing costs are so much more affordable in the Philippines, even in the major metro areas. And you can really expect a budget for a one-bedroom condo between $500 and $750 a month, and that'll get you a place, whether it's Metro Manila, Cebu City, and anywhere on the outsides as far as monthly rent goes. So that's your biggest piece of your cost of living is your rent, right? Whereas in LA, like in Los Angeles, you can't get an apartment, a one-bedroom, under $2,500 per month. That's where it starts and goes up from there. So I think Philippines has it kind of won on the cost of living as far as the rent goes. On transportation, it kind of depends how you choose. There are options here like jeepneys and bus services, but scooters are really inexpensive. You can get a brand new scooter anywhere between $1,000 to $3,000 depending upon what quality you want. I highly recommend the Hondas and the Yamahas. So the Yamaha NMAX is super stable, great bike. And then if you want something a little bit more aggressive, the Honda ADV is an adventure type bike for both on-road and off-road. That's a really popular bike. If not, you can do the standard Honda models like the Click, and there's a couple others, very inexpensive. Gas is like nothing for those things. Now, when it comes to utilities, water and propane here in the Philippines is very affordable. They don't really use natural gas, right? It's more propane. You have to have the tank filled up. Either they come and drop off a new tank or you go take your tank to them. And it's very affordable. But the one thing that is expensive here is electric. So electric per kilowatt hour is the most out of any Southeast Asian country is in the Philippines. Electric's a little bit more, so you have to budget for that. But again, and you're running aircon, right? But the offset on rent is so dramatic. Okay, when you go out to get groceries and you're dining out, you're gonna pay at least half as much in the Philippines. I'm always surprised. Like Lynn and I go to the grocery store probably once a week and just do a general kind of shopping. We eat more at home so we can kind of get what we want the way we want it. And Lynn likes to cook and we do things together. I make my chili and all this stuff. And I think we only spend maybe $100 a week for groceries between the two of us for 7 days. Whereas in the US, you can't kind of go through the grocery store without spending $250, $300 for two of you, right? And then the exchange rate here is in a 61 point something range right now. And so you're getting so much more for $1, 61 pesos to the dollar, totally in your favor, whether it's eating out or even transferring your money and paying bills. And because of that, just very simply, your retirement dollars if you're there, or the money that you've saved to come over here if you're not retired, they simply go much, much further in the Philippines. So you can live, very comfortably in the Philippines. So from a total cost of living, if you were to budget between $1,500 and $2,000 per month, that would cover everything. Your Wi-Fi, your transportation, on $1,500 to $2,000 per month, you could just take, a trike everywhere, a tuk-tuk or whatever transportation. Or you could buy a motorcycle and do that. We prefer having our own car here just because it gives you protection from the sun and the humidity. So the scooters are fun, but if you're going to be in the car all day, I can kind of wear you out. But easily, if you budget $1,500 to $2,000 per month, you can live anywhere in the Philippines quite happily. And yet that's just not the same in the U.S. That's not barely even rent money in the U.S. And rent, of course, is your biggest factor. So I'm going to score this one for the Philippines as a very clear winner. And so they won this particular round. And so that puts our score up at USA 1, Philippines 2. All right, end of round 3. Let's move on to round 4. Now, healthcare. Healthcare is a little bit different over here. And certainly in the U.S., most people have insurance options. If you're retired and you're on Social Security, you're going to have Medicare, and you have all those options. Your quality of care, the ability to find emergency care, urgent care specialists, hospitals that you need, by far it's going to be in the U.S. favor. It's going to be more expensive with your co-pays and all of that and paying for your insurance, but as far as quality of care, don't think it's comparable to the Philippines. The hospitals are going to be generally more advanced, the procedures more technical. If you're in the U.S., especially in the major metro areas in the U.S., where in the Philippines, you really got to go to Metro Manila or Cebu City, especially if you're looking at significant issues like cancer, right? You can get high quality care, like at St. Luke's is a famous one in Manila. Changwa is one in Cebu City, not far from the port. So they have those options if you get in trouble, but once you get away from that, you have more regional hospitals, and it just kind of depends how they're set up and funded. Again, day-to-day stuff, not a problem. They do have urgent cares. It's very affordable. Medication is relatively affordable. But if you're talking like emergency care, like 911, life's on the line, there's no question response time is going to be dramatically different in the U.S. and just not available in certain parts of the Philippines. So there's no question that the U.S. is going to come out ahead on that. Again, routine care in the Philippines, it can be excellent. I've had good experiences when I've gotten food poisoning or actually drank some of the water in the shower by accident. I was smiling and got it in the mouth and had 5 days of fun. When I saw the doctor, it probably cost me $20 and got the medication and off I went. But again, if it's a serious condition, you're going to have to travel to really 1, 2, or 3 cities, Metro Manila, Cebu City, or Davao. So the score as far as quality of healthcare, easily in the USA corner. That's going to tie it up now. Our score is 2-2. So the game is tied. All right, let's move on to the 5th round. And what do we have as a category for round 5? Well, it's actually going to be respect and family values. So in the Philippines, respect is a big thing that is taught to the youth from their parents, just across the board. Respect for your elders, respect for people that are different from you, older from you. They're very polite, and they're taught to be polite. Even the young people say, hello, sir, thank you, sir. I'm talking teenagers. Hello, sir, thank you, sir. They have such a strong family culture here. Family is everything. It's super important. And it's not perfect. There's issues here. But that overall feeling is your family, we take care of you first no matter what. I could tell you story after story about sisters raising the kids in the family because maybe they had 8 to 10 kids and mom and dad were busy providing for the rest of the family. There's so many things. It goes so deep here. A lot of people are raised by their older siblings, not just the parents. It's more about the community, and the community helps you to succeed. So in my mind, when it comes to respect and family values, it's a clear winner in the Philippines. I feel like in the US, we have some of that depending upon the region, but it's actually lost a lot of its respect of what it had maybe 50 years ago. That gives the Philippines a point ahead. So the score is now 3-2, Philippines to the USA. All right, let's move on to round 6. Round 6 is going to be infrastructure, and I'm going to include utilities in there, right? So when we talk about infrastructure, let's talk about moving from point A to point B, and that would be traffic. And if you've been over here in the Philippines, either Metro Manila, Cebu City, or Davao, and some of the other cities, the traffic can be really significant, and air pollution is a real problem. More so in Metro Manila than Cebu City, but the measurements can be pretty significant. For me, I'm really sensitive to pollution. I actually have to wear an N95 mask when we go to the Manila metro area. So air quality is much better in the States, even in major cities with high population like Los Angeles or San Francisco. They have really worked over the last 30 to 40 years to really clean that up, and smog alerts are pretty much a thing of the past there. Okay, as far as roads go, the roads are going to be much more consistent in the US, and they're just going to vary widely in the Philippines depending upon where you are. Now, in the Philippines, most roads are made out of concrete, and that can be good. That lasts for a while, so as long as it's been maintained. But it's very common here to see roads that are torn up, and so it just depends upon the area. But I'd say overall, the quality of the roads and transportation is going to be much simpler, better maintained in the US. Now, when it comes to utilities, especially when we talk about brownouts or blackouts and losing power, that happens on occasion for maintenance in the US, but you're notified ahead of time, and it's just not that often. Where in the Philippines, it happens all the time. Usually it's because they're doing some type of maintenance on the power lines, and so that's why that drives that. So moving on, when we talk about power lines, running the internet in the Philippines, it's typically above ground. Unless you're in a very high-end, newer area, it's all above ground. And it's amazing what it looks like. I mean, it's literally like wire spaghetti going from pole to pole to pole. There can be 50 plus wires up there. The next guy just runs another wire instead of working with what's there. So that's really an interesting thing here. You'd hate to be an electrician in the Philippines. When it comes to public transportation, it's clearly set up better and more efficient in the US than it is in the Philippines, and it's something that they really need to work on here. And when we come to water systems, especially drinkable, potable water, well, in the Philippines, you have to use, filtered water, where anywhere in the US, you can drink right from the tap. That's not the case in the Philippines. It's either bottled water, but most of us get filtered water from the water stations. It's relatively inexpensive. In my area, it's about 20 to 25 pesos for basically a 5-gallon bottle of water, right? That's just our way of life. We have like 4 or 5 of them, and then we put it into a water dispenser and we drink from that. Driving. Boy, driving is a whole nother thing here when you first show up in the Philippines, if you're anywhere near a city type area. And, the cities are probably a little better as far as traffic controls, but here in Bohol, there's very few. So it's kind of the first guy that gets to the intersection, just guns it and goes. And there's just very few, stop signs. There's a few and a few signals, but only on the major roads. It's very much every man for himself. I mean, you just haven't seen traffic like this until you go from, like, let's say Manila Airport to BGC or Makati, and it takes you an hour to go a very short distance and it barely moves. So when I first came over here to Bohol about a year ago, one of the things that we did was to go to the downtown square area. There's a Catholic church there, and that's kind of the center of Tagbilaran. And the traffic is unbelievable. So you literally have a scooter to your left, a truck in front of you, a car to your right, and they're very close by. You're surrounded. There isn't this space with lanes. There are no lanes. It's everyone for themselves at the same time, which should be 3 lanes wide. it's just one lane, and they're all varying depending if they're going to go left or straight. Those are the two options. And the first time I went through it, I was like, holy moly, I'm afraid I'm going to get hit, or hit a scooter or something. And now a year later, I'm just like the rest of them, pushing my way through just like everybody else. Another story I wanted to tell you about is about the electric company. So when we bought this house here, which we actually purchased officially in April of this year, we had to go to a seminar in order to get the power turned on to the house. It took about a week. And it's kind of a silly process, but before they'll send out like a surveyor to run the line from the pole to the house, even though we're in a subdivision, you have to go through this basically seminar about what this power co-op. It's called Bohico here in this part of Dawi, Panglao Island of the Philippines, across the bridge from Tagbilaran. And the story I'm going to tell you could only happen in the Philippines. So we're at the power company. We're in this hour-long seminar. We're upstairs in this room. It's kind of warm. There's no windows. And they're explaining a lot about the power. I guess some of the problems they have is that somebody will tap into their neighbor to steal their power. So they're showing diagrams of like, don't do that. Anyway, I think that's what it was mostly about. And then the history of their co-op, which really wasn't relevant. But twice, while they're telling us all of this information, it's a PowerPoint presentation on a TV screen, on a computer, twice the power went out. Totally dark in the room. We're all sitting there. We're at the power company in the dark. You can't make this stuff up. Twice in an hour, the power went out during the seminar. So that is kind of a frequent thing here. So when we look at all of this infrastructure, utilities, the availability of clean water, clear water to drink, it's clearly in the USA's camp. And so the score for this one is going to go to the USA. Making our score now, tied. USA 3, Philippines 3. Round 6 is over, round 7 to go. Here we go. Our next category is social life and connections. Well, as an expat here, I feel like the community is very friendly and welcoming here, the Filipinos and other expats, because the other expats are from everywhere else, and they're looking to meet people too, right? That's just part of it. So most of them, depending where they're from, they tend to seek their own kind. Like if you're from Germany, they want to meet other Germans. If you're from Italy, the same thing. But overall, they cross over, and it's kind of a slice of heaven because you meet all these different people with different perspectives. And on the Filipinos, they usually will include you if you make friends out of them in their social activities. But that's if you've treated them with respect and treat them like a friend, and we have many like that. And I feel like just overall, it's easier to make friends here. In the last year, we've made a ton of relationships. When we had Lynn's 40th birthday party, we had about 50 people over. And I said, I didn't know any of you a year ago. And here's 50 people sitting here in this little hall thing that we had where we held this little event. It was really fun. It's a pretty big statement. A year ago, I didn't know any of you. And now 50 of you are here celebrating her 40th birthday. So you build friendships much faster in the Philippines than you do in the US. And that's based upon my experience. But keep in mind, I'm coming from the outside of the LA, Orange County area in Southern California. We have a lot of people. And so you're more going to meet your friends either in the workplace or gym or some other common type thing. One of the issues that comes up for guys that retire, and women too, that get to this point, is that they can feel a bit more isolated once they're retired. You don't have that consistent going to the workplace, seeing the same people, those relationships that you would have day to day, that kind of goes away. And for a little while, some of the key people stay in touch with you, and hopefully you'll maintain some of those relationships. But they often kind of drift away, and after a year or two of being retired, you feel a little more isolated, I feel like, in the States. And you really need a strong social network to combat that. And here in the Philippines, it's very easy to create that, depending what you're interested in. We meet people that go to the gym, and so they're more into a healthy lifestyle. And so we have some great friends from the gym. We've met a lot of people at the local church that we go to, and we're of the like mind and values of that type of thing. And others, a lot of guys meet other guys at the bars here in Bohol. So it just kind of depends what your group of people are like, but it's very easy to form relationships here. And walking around our complex where we live, we purposely do that in the evenings and we say hello to people. And we're often invited in. It's a very social place here. So I feel like the score on this one is clearly in the Philippines camp, putting the Philippines ahead 4-3 to the U.S., but still a close game. Now, let's move on to round 8. Round 8 is going to be, as a category, shopping and convenience. Well, when you go to a store in the U.S., you rarely hear, especially a grocery store, and even home improvement or whatever, but you rarely hear it's out of stock. The U.S. has got some pretty good quality reorder systems that work automatically. They basically work off the rate of sale, so if the item is sold, it automatically reorders for them. They don't really do a lot of that in the Philippines. They have some of those systems, I suppose, at the grocery store level, the bigger ones, but it often is out of stock is what you hear. You don't consistently always find everything, unless it's something like they're going to have chicken, pork, and fish. That's always going to be the case. But a lot of the other ancillary items, they could be out of stock for a while. It just kind of comes in and out. And the product selection is so much wider when it comes to different choices from different brands within the U.S. So that's, hardly comparable. Now, the home improvement stores here in the Philippines are actually pretty good. They're a little bit limited on product choices on some things, but there are 4 primary chains that we have in the Bohol area that are kind of throughout the Philippines. One is called Wilcon, another is called Triumph Home Depot, another is DIY, which has got over 100 stores throughout Southeast Asia, and City Hardware, which also has a lot of stores, kind of throughout the whole southeastern region. And you can find most things that you need. But like I was just looking for a plastic drop cloth, and I went to 3 of those stores, they didn't have it. They actually paint without using the drop cloth. Interesting. And then, of course, if you're going to have items shipped to you in the U.S., Amazon's going to change the whole model for that. You're going to get same-day delivery or next-day delivery if you're a Prime member, and that's just hard to beat. You can get Amazon items over here, but it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to get here, even if you're a Prime member, and they're going to add another $10 to $20 per item. So it's going to cost you a bit more and take more time, and that's even if you're a Prime member. But again, if you really need it, you can get it. So the out of stock thing is just something I hear a lot, whether it's even at restaurants in the Philippines. On the menu, one of the first things you'll have to do is ask them, is there anything that's out of stock, so that you get that out of the way so you know what you can order. So it's not just the grocery store, but it happens there too. And I feel like back in the US, we just don't hear that often out of stock. It certainly can happen, but it's not that frequently, right? And I think it's a general excuse here of, for whatever reason, if the product's not available, they just say it's out of stock. So that's something that happens. Another quick story. Last week we were in Cebu City, had just landed from LA, flew from LA to Hong Kong on Cathay Pacific. I like that airline because I typically can pick my seat. I need to be an aisle and I prefer the bulkhead. I got to get up and walk around a lot. And then I get to Hong Kong and then change planes and then go on to Cebu City. And one of the things we like about Cebu City is it's got 2 different Texas Roadhouse locations. As I mentioned before, that's one of our favorite places, and it's fun for Lynn and I to get caught back up again when we're apart and go get a good meal. And so I ordered a hamburger with steak fries, the bigger, thicker French fries. And the waiter came back and said, "Hey, could I take potato chips instead of the steak fries?" I'm like, "You're out of steak fries? Out of steakhouse?" And he's like, "We're out of potatoes." It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He said the shipment hasn't arrived yet. So they're not serving any type of potatoes at a steakhouse. That would be unheard of in the U.S. So in this category, I feel like USA is clearly the winner. They get the point, making the score 4-4. Oh, we're tied now. USA 4, Philippines 4. And that makes it halftime. We're halfway through our round of 16. Tied. Wow, can you believe it? So it's close. Which country's going to move ahead? I didn't think it'd be this close, but it is so far. Score's tied 4-4. So, just like they say at the World Cup, halfway done and halfway to go. 45 minutes down and 45 minutes to go. You notice the count on the clock, the time on the clock, it counts up. It's different than all other sports we have in the US. We always count down, right? 15, 10, 9, 8, 7, this goes up. Starts at 0, goes to 45 minutes for the first half. They add the injury time, stoppage time, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, halftime. Then they start again, the clock starts again, whatever it was, 50 minutes, 52 minutes. And then it runs up 45 more minutes, so you get up to 90, and then they add the stoppage extra time. So hopefully we're not going to have to go to penalty kicks here and have a tie like they did in some of the games. All right, let's move on to round number 9. Now, the category for round 9 is international lifestyle and just general pace of life. Okay? Quality of life, the speed of it, what life is like. I feel like expats here are so diverse. I was very surprised, even in Bohol here. I have friends that are from France. I've got 2 from France in particular. I have friends from Italy. I have friends from Germany, Australia, New Zealand, the UK. I've met Russians, Ukrainians. I mean, the people are from everywhere. And the cool thing is they kind of give you a different perspective than what we're used to in the West. And for me, I really like that. It's like an international exposure to what life's like, and I can ask them questions what's going on in their country. And I feel like the lifestyle here is very relaxed if you so choose it to be. It's not a rat race like it is back in the US. The pace is much slower. And it takes a little bit of time to adjust to it, but I really like it like that. And if you're into outdoor living and you like beaches or pool time, you like to be in the sun, you can't beat it as far as the Philippines goes, right? It's pretty much all year round, shorts and flip-flops weather. We do have a rainy season, but even there, it doesn't really rain that much unless you're in particular areas. It just kind of cools off a bit. And I feel like it's less stress here. It's certainly less expensive, which helps to make it less stressful, right? The taxes are less, the food price is less, the rent is less. It's just easier to get by, right? And you just don't have the same demands like you do in everyday life back in the West. So I feel like it's a lot less stressful. So in this category, I clearly think the Philippines wins, giving them the point, and the score is now 5 Philippines, 4 the US. Let's move on. Round 10. Employment and opportunity. Well, career opportunities are going to be stronger in the US. And business opportunities, also less restrictive, are just going to be more prevalent, easier to get into in the US. You're going to have a higher earning potential in the US. You basically have to make your money someplace else and bring it here. Now, you can buy into a business. There's rules on all these things, and there's categories that you can get into where it's a little bit easier and the government supports it, things like renewable energy. But overall, Philippines has some rules here that are very protective of their jobs. And they purposely restrict access to them by foreigners. So if you think you have some level of expertise and you're just going to walk in and take a job here, not going to happen. Now the rule is, if you have a particular expertise that they do not have, then you can get a working permit and allowed to work here. So otherwise, if you're like on a tourist visa, like most of us, right? Most of us, myself included, we renew our tourist visa every 60 days. We're not allowed to work in the country. We can, work online or whatever, but not in the country. So if you're in the process of building wealth, you probably want to keep that in the States. If you're looking to save it up for retirement and then want to invest it and all that type of thing, America's going to be kind of hard to beat from that standpoint as you're building a retirement and you want to put it in the stock market and all that. But if you are at the point that you've built that nest egg, you're ready to end the career and go someplace else, you're willing to go to someplace else, and you want to conserve those retirement funds, well, the Philippines is affordable and hard to beat and a very clear winner. Now, the other kind of caveat to that is assuming that you stay healthy, right? Again, I've gone through the medical part of it. It's stronger in the West, and a lot of expats here, when they have serious things happen, they go home for it. They get it taken care of. So if you're in the wealth building phase of your career, that's going to be much easier to do in the US or other Western countries. And then once you've had that nest egg, then you would look at the Philippines. So the US is going to be a clear winner here as far as building wealth and investing that over time until you're ready to do something with that nest egg. So the clear winner here is USA, which now ties up the score at 5 USA, 5 Philippines. Close game. Let's move on to the next category. Next category for round 11 is dating and relationships. Well, let's be honest. That's one of the main reasons why most expats come to the Philippines. As the Filipinos are just very accepting and loving, and they're different than most Western women. They have a very family-oriented culture here, and many expats meet their partners here. Even if they're not looking for that, they said, "Oh, I don't want a relationship. I've had such problems." They come over here. They're here for a while. They meet somebody. Happens all the time. And there really is a cultural acceptance of age gap relationships. That's a very real thing here. And it can be as much as even 20 or 30 years apart. Okay, I feel like in relationships here, they more emphasize compatibility, shared values, getting along, having similar interests. And so the winner is so far in the Philippines category. And that if you've come through a broken relationship, you really ought to come over here and give it a try instead of giving up if that's where you're at. That puts the score ahead. Philippines 6, USA 5. All right, let's move on to round 12. Round 12 is going to be driving and transportation. Well, as far as organized traffic systems go, that allows the flow of traffic to move along, where the signals are timed together and so you can kind of keep your pace going, that's more of a Western thing. You're not going to have much of that anywhere in the Philippines. Your roads are going to be better, your highway systems are better in the US. They're funded on a national level, on a state level, and here it's just kind of hit or miss. And the predictability of the timing of the transportation, there's a little bit more variability here. Culturally, it's very acceptable to be late. Sometimes people are 30 to 60 minutes late to a regular social engagement. So having on-time transportation, that's going to be more consistent, let's just say, in the US. Again, there's just some cultural differences there. And as far as ease of driving, it's much easier in the US because it's safer, right? They have a lot of rules. And if you break those rules, there's a cop nearby to give you a ticket. Here in Bohol, I've never been stopped on anything, on traffic. The police here pretty much don't get involved unless there's an accident, then they come out and make a report. But other than that, there's no one sitting on the side of the road measuring your speed. People drive anywhere from 25 kilometers per hour to 75 kilometers per hour or higher on the same road at the same time. It's craziness. So as far as safety goes and the way that they get the driver's license, that's a whole nother conversation. But it's just safer in the U.S. So when we went to get Lynn's driver's license, and I had her study the same type of what we call DMV book in the U.S. Here it's called the LTO, Land Transportation Office. And when we went in for her to take the driver's test, the guard who works for the LTO wanted to know whether we would just pay the fixer and get her license instead of taking the test, both written and driving. Different culture, different place, but makes it a little bit less safe, right? That means people are doing that, not reading the rule book, not knowing all of the rules on traffic, and driving. So it is what it is. So in this one, the score is going to go to the U.S., tying it up at 6-6. Okay, let's move on as we come into the Final Four, or the Final Four teams be like the semifinals, right? Very exciting. Here's the Final Four categories that we're going to cover, and like I said, the score is tied. It is close. So it should get interesting from here to see how these final 4 categories come on in. For round 13, we're going to talk about climate. Now, climate's going to really depend upon where you're coming from. So if you're from the Northeast, the Midwest, Canada, Northwest, you're going to like the Philippines probably because it's an endless summer. It really doesn't vary that much between the rainy season for 6 months and the dry season. You know, it's a few degrees in temperature and a little bit of humidity. So it's an endless summer here if that's what you're looking for. There's absolutely no snow. So if you're a snowbird looking to get out of it, this is the place to come, right? The best weather here is pretty much from October, November through February, I would say. It warms up, hits summertime early here between March and May. If you're looking for tropical living, this is a great place to be. Warm weather, just make sure you can take some humidity because it's usually 70-75% humidity every single day. And here in Bohol, the low is 80, the high is 90, almost never goes over 90. If you're in Metro Manila, you're going to hit 95, 96, 97, and sometimes 80-85% humidity. Just gets hotter over there on Luzon. Like I mentioned, there is a rainy season, but it really depends where you're located. It's more an impact if you're in a typhoon area. The typhoon alley really here comes in from the ocean, kind of east of Mindanao, and then that's going to be north of Bohol, and then north of Cebu. Sometimes it'll hit the tip of Cebu, some of the northern areas. Every once in a while it hits Cebu City, but really misses Cebu and smacks right into Samar and Leyte, hits them almost every single time, goes across those 2 islands, heads to the northwest, and it's going to hit the northwest Luzon part of the Philippines, which, Metro Manila is more central Luzon, but boy, northern Luzon gets hit every single time. Where we are in Bohol, especially in the Panglao area, which is kind of on the southwest portion of it, we get a little wind and rain, but we almost never get a typhoon. So it really depends where you're located. Dumaguete's pretty good about that too. It's only going to happen once in a great while. Now we do have earthquakes over here. They can be frequent depending upon the area. There's a lot that happens in Mindanao. Lately it seems like Cebu, but it can kind of happen anywhere. Doesn't usually cause a big problem unless it's a really big quake. We had one recently in Mindanao that was 7.8. I don't know if you guys saw the footage of that, but there was a Jollibee's that collapsed, a 3-story Jollibee's. And right before it collapsed, the workers are yelling at the other workers, get out, get out, get out, and the whole building comes down. It's pretty crazy stuff. And then every once in a while, there's a few volcanoes around that are still active, and then they'll blow off, an eruption, some steam, but it's not typically catastrophic. So that's just part of life here. Keeps things interesting. An earthquake here, volcano blow there, but really it's not that big of a deal. It hasn't really been a problem the last year for us. Okay, so really, the climate's going to depend upon what you're comparing it to, right? So if you're coming from California and you're comparing it to the Philippines, it's going to be much more humid here. And so I would say the weather's better in Southern California. But if you're coming from the Midwest, Northeast, Northwest, Canada, the weather's much better here and you're probably going to enjoy it. So we're going to put for climate into the side of the Philippines, moving them ahead with a score of 7-6. All right, let's move on to round 14. Now, round 14 is going to be natural beauty, access to your surroundings, the outdoors, right? If you want more of an outdoor, lifestyle type place, the Philippines is pretty strong that way because once you're outside of the major metropolitan areas, you can get there. And most of the other areas, like whether it's Bohol, Cagayan de Oro, Dumaguete, Rojas City, all these major places where expats go, you can get to nature, whether it's the beaches, if you're into diving or snorkeling or island hopping, all of those things are very accessible here in the Philippines. And if you go into the mountain regions, like a lot of people haven't done this, but if you go over to Mindanao, and you go in the center of the island, there's an area called Bukidnon. And the Bukidnon Mountains kind of look like a version of the Rockies or the Sierras. Tons of water, incredibly powerful waterfalls, gorgeous mountains, just really, really beautiful. A lot to see in Mindanao. And of course, just about anywhere in the Philippines, you can have pretty quick ocean access. So I would say as far as all those go in this category, it's clearly in the Philippines corner. We're going to give the point to the Philippines. And so our score now is USA 6, Philippines moving ahead now with a gap of 2 points to 8. So 8-6 Philippines. Okay, let's move on to round 15. Now, round 15 I'm going to call comfortable retirement lifestyle, or comfortable lifestyle if you're not yet retired, right? So if you're got a set fixed income, let's say you're on Social Security or you're on a public pension plan if you work for the government, whatever it is that you have, or it's just your savings, your income is going to stretch so much further due to the cost of living here than the US. It's really not comparable. And the Philippines can be a very social place. Many expats are here for the same reasons you would come here. They're looking to do something different. They want to leave the past behind them. They want to live the last 1/3 of their life after they've worked all of these years. There are a lot of different reasons why people come over here, but the pace is just much more relaxed, and you can kind of have a lifestyle that you decide to play. For example, a lot of people are into pickleball here. Pickleball is super popular in Bohol. Pickleball courts popping up everywhere. There's pickleball clubs, people getting together all the time. You want to do that type of thing? It's here. Very easy to do. I just feel like the quality of life that you can have, because rent's affordable, food's affordable. If you want to snorkel or dive or island hop, it's all very affordable. And so that kind of works for a lot of people for that type of a lifestyle. And if you're a retiree, your dollar just goes so much further. So I'm clearly going to give that point to the Philippines, making the score 9 Philippines, USA 6. Oh, we got a gap of 3 points now. Okay, we're now into the final round. The round 16 of the round of 16. And this is, the question is going to be basically, where would you choose? In this case, it's going to be for me, where would I choose? I've lived in both places, right? And so I can talk to both places. And I'll be very thankful for what I have been given and was having the opportunity to have in America, which was, it gave me a place to get my college education. Got a great education that then led into a career. I'm thankful for that career. There was a lot of opportunities for me there. And in that kind of time of life, when you're in college, it's easy to make friends. And of course, your family's important. All of those things kind of tie together. And so for those first couple of life stages, when you're moving through from your 20s to 30s to 40s, all of that is going to be pretty strong as far as spending your time back in America, right? Your cost of living is more there, and that's just something you have to plan for. But in that life stage, that makes sense. But when you get to your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and you have a more fixed income. So for me, this kind of idea of keeping up with the Joneses that we were raised with, right? Where you got to get a good education, you got to get the best job, you got to get a house and get a debt, the mortgage and all that. The pressure doesn't exist here. That's a personal choice. You can do those things, but you're bringing your Western expectations over here. You don't need to. All you're doing is complicating your life. You're really free here to choose the lifestyle that you desire. And you don't have all of that other, whether peer pressure or family pressure back home, where back there they're comparing you to your other siblings, what they've done. Oh, your brother Johnny, blah, 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 your sister Sally. Who cares? They don't care about that here. They're just not as materialistic as the society here. It's not their focus. They more value friendships and family. And that's more how they measure success, not by, financial gain. So for me, the answer is, at this stage of my life, this is where I want to be. It's just where I want to be. I'm happy here with Lynn. I don't mind sharing with you that we bought this beautiful home here. It's not big. It's maybe 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and a subdivision. You can go back on the channel and see all the videos. I paid $108,000 for the house. You can't do that in the US. So for me, I'm choosing the Philippines for this stage of my life. Again, if I was earlier, 20s, 30s, 40s, even early 50s, climbing, making my way through, probably wouldn't work for me. Now, you may have a different lifestyle. Maybe you work remotely and then you can come over here. That'd be awesome. Your dollar goes so much further. I recently just met this guy. I think he was from New York, and he's in finance, and he's been over here 18 years, and he looks like he's 40 years old. So he's been able to make it work. Some of you can do that. Most of us kind of go through the regular process. Anyway, I'm choosing the Philippines for this stage of my life, and I do think it's contingent upon life stage. So our final score, the way that I'm rating this, and I know it's subjective, but I'm getting Philippines 10, USA 6 as far as wanting to live someplace else where it's affordable and the lifestyle is what I want to have. Now, before anyone says, well, one country is better than the other, that's not really the point of this, because a lot of these things are going to be weighted differently for you depending upon what's important to you, and a lot of it's obviously subjective. But I'm just trying to give you something to think about to see what's right for your particular situation. And then keep in mind that the Philippines is not for everybody. And the list I'm giving you is not completely exhaustive. I could have kept going and giving you another 20 categories of comparing things. But I want to keep this video at a reasonable time frame, so I didn't do that. There's just not time to cover everything that we could on that topic. So there's a lot of other things we could talk about. Safety crime would be one of them. That's been a topic of conversation recently in the Philippines because there's been some attacks on some Americans. But again, there's like 1, 2, or 3 of them out of the whole country. So it's a safe place. If that's a question in your mind, it's a safe place. And the point really is just to take a look at your own lifestyle, your own expectations, and figure out what would work for you. Like I said before, if you're 30 years old, you have a wife and kids, you're building your career, you're raising your family, unless you can work remote, then America is probably the right place for you. And it's going to win for you in this category because your priorities are different. But once you're a guy in your 50s and your kids have gone off to college and they're having their own lives and families, and then you turn 60 and then you're all of a sudden looking at retirement, you've had that career, it's in the past, and then you're like, okay, what's the best way to spend the last 1/3 of my life? If you're a little bit adventurous and you're willing to try something new and really make the most of those retirement years, then the Philippines is a good option. You know, it's got warm weather over here. The people are very friendly. I find them very amazing overall. It's a slower pace of life. And the Philippines is not perfect. It still has its own issues. It's a developing country. And so there are still growing pains with that. It's not the same as the West or the US. But in many ways, when you add it all together, it's really hard to beat if you're looking to stretch your dollar and try something new. And that's why after living here for the last year and traveling here the last 10 years, right? Often 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time, I'm more convinced than ever that for me, this was the right move. And I'll be honest, it takes some adjustment. You have to find the right place for you to live. Metro Manila, BGC, Makati is one way, Cebu City is another. Going outside of those areas, getting more out into the province or more access to the beach, it's a different type of lifestyle. You're going to give up certain things to gain certain things. So again, the Philippines isn't for everyone. You're going to have to be willing to adapt to a new way of life. And you're going to have to accept that things are done differently here. And it's not so much right or wrong, it's different. So it does require a little bit of flexibility to make it all work for the longer term, and that's just part of living in a foreign country anywhere in the world. You just can't expect it to be the same as where you came from. The rules are going to be a little bit different. They're not a problem, they're just different. They have their own way of doing things. And the sooner you accept that and not fight against it, and stop trying to change what you think is not right, then everything will settle down and life will be good. All right, so that's the answer for me. Now I want to hear from you. So if you've lived in the US and another country, I'd love to know how you would score this, especially if you've already considered the Philippines. And I'd like to know which rounds would you give to the USA as far as the points go, and which rounds would you give to the Philippines, and how you would score the overall match. So please let me know what you think. and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.